Good morning, everybody.
Good morning. And welcome to our webinar this morning on hybrid working. Great to have you all joining us today. Just open the doors, so letting everyone sort of filter in this morning. There we go.
Feel free to say a wee hello in the chat. Let us know where you're from.
Go. Good morning, Marianne. Here we are. Great to have you. Hi, Grace. Nina, lovely to have you with us today. And Dominic, fantastic. Lots of flex advocates here in the call. That's really, really good. Lovely. Caroline, great. Oh, we've got someone from Fife, Dundee. This is very good. Very
Frosty
national.
Fife, no less.
Sandra, hi everybody. Just get settled in. We'll just get everyone filtered in. We'll make a start in a minute or so. Hi, Catherine. There's Dawn from Edinburgh, North Edinburgh. Lovely. Good. We've got a nice variety this morning. Inverness, hi Fiona. And Catherine, that's great.
Morning.
Good to see everybody. You're not the only one, Rachel, with tech problems this morning, so crack on. Hopefully see you in a second. Hi, Lynn. Great to have you with us.
From Greece, how exciting.
Kathy, lovely. Oh, in Birmingham, good. We're all over travelling today. Good. Let's give it just a few more seconds just to let everyone come in. Get settled. And I've turned off my heater actually. It was quite noisy at the side there. It's freezing here today. Hi, Lindsay. Great. Okay. Numbers are just going up a little bit more. Okay. Right, well, we just get started. There's Eleonora. Lovely. Okay. Good morning. Okay, we'll just get started. Great stuff. So hello and welcome everyone. Thank you so much for coming along today. I'm Lisa Gallagher, one of the co-founders of Flexibility Works. I'm here with my small but mighty team. We've got Nikki, Jenny and Laura Jane on the call with us today. And thank you all so much for coming along on this chilly morning. We're all hopefully nice and warm in our offices or our homes or elsewhere. And it shows that we've got a great number of people coming along today, and it shows that we're not the only ones who are curious about hybrid working and what that really looks like just now. For those of you who don't know, Flexibility Works, we're a social enterprise that is all about shifting the dial on flexible working. We provide bespoke consultancy and training, we conduct research, we're involved in policy work, and we've got an amazing community of about 900 employers all around Scotland that are interested in the subject of flexible working. And hybrid working is a topic that we've been talking to a lot of our clients about at the moment. So we thought this would be a great opportunity to run an event on some of our research that we've conducted on this topic. But I think when it comes to hybrid working, a lot of the media stories that we've been reading seem to be about people going back to the office, and usually at hybrid, a high profile company. But we know the media like extreme examples, but those headlines haven't really tallied with our own experiences of working directly with Scottish employers, where we've found that people generally feel that hybrid is quite a positive thing. There have, of course, been some challenges along the way, and hybrid is not always perfect, but by and large, most people that we've been speaking to seem to like it and or want to make it work. So to find out what's really going on at scale, we surveyed over 1,000 Scottish office-based workers over the summer to find out how many days that they spend in the office each week, what their employer has asked them to do, how they feel about what their employer's instructions are, and how they feel about that sense of connection with their colleagues and how that company culture is really feeling at the moment. So things that I'm sure are really important to all of you as well. And what we found that nearly 3/4 of Scottish office workers can work hybrid, and that in general, it's having quite a positive impact. I think it's also easy to feel at the moment that hybrid is a bit of old hat. We've been working this way for a few years now, but let's not forget that hybrid really is still the biggest shake-up to working patterns in the last century. And we're really still in that test and learn phase. So we hope that our findings are going to help you to benchmark your own organisation's approach to hybrid and help you to make some evidence-based decisions on hybrid in the future. So in a moment, I'm going to head over to our head of comms, Jenny, to share the main findings from our research. Then we're going to hear two great practical examples from two different companies. First up will be Silka Patel at Leidos on what this IT and defence firm is doing to encourage people to spend meaningful time together in this new hybrid world, something I think a lot of people will be thinking about. And then we're going to hear from Gillian and Goldie at Scottish Enterprise and how they are monitoring and evaluating the impact of hybrid working. So again, something that's really important and we speak a lot to our own clients about. There's going to be then some time for some questions. So if you've got any thoughts, comments or questions as the speakers are talking, please pop them in the Q&A function and we'll cover off as many of these as possible. And we're going to finish all of this by 11 o'clock. So I hope that sounds okay to everybody. And I'm going to hand over to Jenny to share the data with you all. Thank you.
Thanks, Lisa. And apologies, everyone. It's my fault you've got the slides up now and all our faces are really small. But if I take my slides down, they may not come back. So bear with me while I do my bit and then I'll close it down. So I'm just going to talk you through some of the main findings that we have, if I can move my slides on. Which I can't. We're in. So as Lisa mentioned, we surveyed over 1,000 Scottish office workers looking at whether they were working hybrid or not and what they'd been asked to do and how they felt about it. So very broadly, we found that about 71% of office workers can work in a hybrid way. Interestingly, 60% are using it. So not everyone who can work hybrid is working hybrid. And about 29% have been told they've got to be in the office full time. So what does that look like on a day-by-day basis? Who's in the office, who's not? So for all Scottish office workers, you can see here 40% are in the office 5 days a week, and then there's a split across the rest of the week. And it's perhaps more in the office than people might realise. Nearly 3/4 of people are in at least 3 days a week, and over 90% are in at least once a week. So what have employers asked people to do? This is quite a mixed picture, as you'll see from this graph here. Some people have complete freedom as to when they go into the office, and other people have been asked to go in all the time. What I would just say in terms of who's been asked to go in all the time, there's been a slight shift from last year. We did the same survey the year before, and there's been a slight increase, about 7%, in workers who've been told they have to be in the office full time now. And that's come off all of the other categories. It's not that everyone who was doing 4 days a week now has to do 5. There's been a very slight decrease across the other types of hybrid. But by and large, it's not really shifted. It's really similar. And the only thing I want to point out here in terms of what people have been asked to do is that there are some differences depending on what kind of worker you are. Interestingly, there seems to be a bit of a gender difference. We know that more men feel certainly that they have complete freedom to come into the office whenever they like, compared to women, and more women feel they've been told to come in full time. And we're not quite sure why that is. There wasn't anything in our data that explained it in terms of seniority or level of pay. We didn't ask lots and lots of questions about their type of job and things like that. So it might be that there's something about the types of job that they're doing that we can't see, but it's just something to bear in mind, that there might be some kind of difference perhaps in how employers are talking to their teams and how messages are being perceived. There was also a difference with excuse me, with newer recruits. If you've been with your employer less than a year, you're much more likely to have complete freedom as to when you go in than somebody who's been with their employer a lot longer. So are workers following the instructions? Hopefully reassuringly for employers, most people are. And perhaps more people are going in more than they've been asked to do than people might realise. And that was fairly, there were some differences between men and women, but not much. That broadly the categories were all the same. So are workers happy with what their employer has proposed on where they work? Most people on the surface say, yeah, I'm quite happy. There's 71% there saying they're happy. But the difference that I wanted to point out is, perhaps unsurprisingly, that if you have a bit more control over when you can go in, you are then happier with what you've been asked to do. So office workers who've been told to come in all the time are less happy than hybrid workers, and those hybrid workers who have the most choice and control are the most happy. So who would like to go in more and who would like to go in less? So it's interesting that we asked, first of all, are you happy? And most people said, yes, I am. But then when we probed a bit further and asked quite proactively, would you like to go in more or would you like to go in less? We got slightly different responses. So the top line there shows all workers. So you'll see there that 29% would like to go in the office more than they've been asked to, and 43% would like to go in the office less than they've been asked to. In terms of who wants to go in more, there was a really clear message from younger workers. Under 25s really want to be in the office more than any other age group by quite a margin. And then there are 37% of men who would like to be in the office more, and also 22% of women who would like to be in more. I think lots of people assume that women want to be in less, and you'll see from the other chart, a big chunk of women do want to be in less, but we're all different and we all have different preferences. And actually 1 in 5 women want to go in more than they've been asked to do. So on the column on the right, looking at who wants to go in less, you'll see there, I've just mentioned women, 48% would like to go in less than they've been asked to. That's obviously a big chunk. And also the next couple of categories are looking at age brackets. Now, we didn't ask people whether they were a parent in this piece of research, but I think that's probably what's going on behind those numbers. People aged 25 to 44 are the most likely to have children at home who they need to be around for. And I've also put in there at the bottom men, because let's not forget, actually quite a lot of men would like to be in the office less than they've been asked to as well. We looked at how employers are communicating, certainly how workers felt employers were communicating, and we asked them how much they agreed with several statements. So you can see these up on the screen, and what we've done is on the left-hand side, you can see the proportion that agreed. I'm clear, my employer's made a good job at communicating where I work, and my employer's taken on board my views. And then on the right-hand side, you've got the figures of the little men. And what we've done there is we've coloured in those that either actively disagreed or were kind of ambivalent and didn't really agree or disagree. And we've shown it like this because while employers seem to be doing a pretty good job in communicating what people should be doing and involving them in that process, I think showing it with the little figures helps highlight that there are quite a lot of people in teams that aren't clear what they should be doing and that perhaps don't feel that their view has been taken on board. So while employers are doing pretty well, I think this is showing that there's still quite a lot of room for improvement on how employers talk to their staff, involve their staff, and kind of cascade those messages and show what they would like to see. I like this slide. This is one of my favourites. So how is hybrid affecting company culture and connection? We know from our work that lots of employers are concerned about what kind of impact hybrid might be having on how well teams feel they can be in touch with each other, how connected they feel, and what the company culture is like overall. And what this is showing is that actually hybrid isn't harming connection and culture. In fact, no matter what kind of hybrid arrangement you have, people's sense of connection, whether they feel aligned with company values and how they feel about company culture, is more positive than people who've been asked to be in the office all the time. And the important point here is that the more choice and the more control people have about when they come into the office, the more positive they are in how connected they feel, how aligned they feel, and how they feel their company culture is. So what do office workers think the office is useful for? This table shows different kinds of tasks and where people feel that those tasks happen best. There is a lot down there where people like working in the office, but there are really high proportions on some of those aspects where people prefer hybrid or prefer home working. And we're showing this because we know that some of the best hybrid arrangements are where employers are quite clear with people on what sorts of tasks can and should be done at home and what sorts of tasks people should be coming into the office for. So we hope that this gives you a better idea, or perhaps reinforces what you're already doing in terms of what kind of things you're asking people to come in for. And following on from that, we asked people what is their single most important reason to go to the office. There's a lot on this slide, but 22% of people said that their main reason for wanting to go to the office was a very simple, very practical, I can sit next to my colleagues and I can resolve issues quicker than if I'm at home. There's other things on the list there, clearly social time and connection, being with new recruits, helping people to learn, doing brainstorms, kind of collaborative, creative tasks. They're all in there. And we're sharing this because we know lots of employers have rightly looked at their office space and perhaps reconfigured the space so there's more room for kind of teams to get together, for creative tasks to all sit around together. And I guess what we're saying here is that's great and that's definitely needed, but don't forget that actually lots of workers just want to come in to do normal work sat next to their colleagues. So don't leave out too many normal desks as well. So the key takeaways from the research here is hybrid is the new normal. Lisa mentioned at the start that there have been a few headlines recently sort of suggesting that hybrid is coming to an end, or that people are going back to the office much more. But what our data shows is that 71% of office workers are being offered hybrid, and there really hasn't been much of a shift in the last year. In that it's not rapidly dwindling away at all. We know that it's well used and it's very well liked by people. Now, I mentioned a little bit about women and women perhaps having slightly less control than men. And we also noticed when people were asked whether they felt their views had been taken on board, that women felt less listened to than men. And we know that women would like to be in the office less than men. But I don't want people to go away thinking that all hybrid must be bad for women. It's not working for women. Hybrid can be brilliant for women. It can really help in their careers. It can help them take on more responsibility, take on more hours. What is bad for women is if hybrid isn't managed very well. So if their views aren't listened to, if their views aren't sought, if someone in the office who is their manager perhaps doesn't rate them as highly because they're not coming into the office as often as someone else in the team, that is a potential problem for women. But hybrid itself is not the problem. Hybrid can be great for women. Another key message that I wanted to get across today is how much young workers really want to be in the office. I think it was 58% of under 25s want to come in more than they've been asked to do. And so employers, I hope, will think about what kind of office experience these younger workers will have. If they want to come in and they are coming in, are they sat on their own, or have they got peers around them? Have they got more experienced colleagues with them that they can learn from? Because they will want a really positive experience, and that's, I hope, what you would want for them too. Newer recruits have more control than workers who've been with their employer for longer. That came through in several of the kind of categories of questions that we asked. And I guess we're making this point today because we know that when people go for interview and they look for new jobs, hybrid working is coming up more frequently, which is good, and people are getting a more flexible working pattern when they change job. But if you want to retain your staff, then that's something that you also need to think about, because our figures show if they start looking for another job because they want more flexibility, they will probably get it elsewhere. But if you were to offer it to them in their current role, that might be enough to keep them, and that would be good for you too. The point 5 is about connection and culture, as I spoke about earlier. So it's not, connection and culture is not dependent on time in the office. Hybrid isn't harming culture and connection. It can improve it. And if you really want to help on that culture and connection side, giving people more choice and more control is what seems to work best. And then the final point is that while employers are doing pretty well on communicating their hybrid arrangements, there's definitely room for improvement. So for employers to think about, how are you asking people for their opinions? How are you communicating your messages? Are you constantly repeating your messages? If you just tell people once and then leave it 6 months, people start to forget what the message is. Are you role modeling the kind of behaviours that you would like to see? Are your senior leaders working from home, working in a hybrid way, or are they always in the office? Because that sends a powerful message too. That's a kind of whistle-stop tour. There's quite a lot in the report itself, and happy to take questions. And if there's not enough time here, happy to take questions and pick them up afterwards as well. And that's me.
Thank you so much, Jenny. There's so much in that report. What started off as a poll about hybrid working ended up, you collected such a lot of really rich data. Someone asked about the slides. So the slides will be shared after the event. The report, we've popped the link to the report in the chat, so you can pick that up there. And please remember to post any questions you've got for Jenny, or as we go on with the other speakers, in the chat. So I'm not going to say any more about that report, because I'm really keen that we get on and hear from our 2 employer speakers who have come along today to share quite practically what they're doing in their organisations on 2 very specific topics around hybrid working. So thank you, Jenny. And I'm now going to invite Silka Patel to come along and share what they're doing at Leidos. And Silka is a social value manager at Leidos.
Thanks so much, Nikki. And I found those insights really revealing, in the sense you probably saw me nodding away in agreement to a lot of what you have found as well. So I certainly feel them on a daily basis from a Leidos perspective. And by no means is Leidos at a stage where we're putting our hands up saying, guys, we've nailed this. We know exactly what we're doing when it comes to hybrid working. I think we're all on a journey, and we're just at different stages of our journey, depending on the sizes of our organisation, the support, the way we're set up, our geographical locations. So by no means, please don't come away saying Leidos is the expert on this, but I want to take this time and this opportunity to go through some things, hiccups and learning curves, and things that we are getting right, in the hope that for our participants that are listening actively on today's session can take a nugget or two away and say, how about we give this a go? We could try this. We've not thought about that. And this is why the whole point of these sessions are great. If we're all sharing information and learning, we're enriching the experiences of our employees together. And that's the whole point of Flexibility Works as well. So thank you for inviting me. I'm just going to take a few minutes to go through what we're learning on our journey. So from a point of view of hybrid working and what it looks like at Leidos, it actually means different things to different people, which is the true essence of flexibility. There isn't one clear-cut definition that works for everyone. And in response to that, we created a program which was actually launched 2 years prior to the pandemic, fortunate for us in terms of timing, and it's called Leidos Life. And Leidos Life is our true flexibility options of where you work, setting expectations, best practices, and providing support materials for our managers around how to lead virtual teams as well. Because it's one thing saying everyone can pick the models and packages that work for them, but it's another thing expecting people to know then how to lead teams who are opting to work hybridly as well. The tipping point for us in Leidos is that 2 days a week versus 3 days a week and more. And that was very evident as we started to come out of the pandemic. And I think it's important to say it's what works for you. And that was the company line that came down from top down. It wasn't you will be in the office 3 days a week or 4 days a week. And I'm going to stress that point there. I'm going to talk on about language later on, but it was what works for you. But typically it's the tipping point between 2 days and 3 days for us. And also hybrid felt more natural to Leidos than maybe perhaps some other companies, because in what we do, we are a global technology organization, and we work with many public sector departments like Scottish Government, Scottish Parliament, the Home Office, HMRC, the MOD, for example. And so our teams are used to working remotely and on customer sites and in offices as well. So going back to the point of depending where you are in your journey, hybrid may come a little bit more easier to some than others. So don't use it as a stick to beat yourself up on. There are plenty other sticks out there that you can use. So in terms of what people have been asked to come into the office for, the types of meetings, client meetings are traditionally done face-to-face, particularly when the client wants to come in and meet you face-to-face. We take their lead on it. Unless they are offering remote, we would say to our employees, if they're saying they want to come in face-to-face, and if you're able to physically, then please do. Also, monthly and quarterly team meetings, we find a huge an engagement in terms of that networking, which came up on the survey, that camaraderie and building rapport with one another. It just happens more easily when people are together in a room. So monthly and quarterly team meetings tend to be face-to-face. But also, if you think about what's happened during the pandemic as well, we were still continuing business as usual. And if anything, the technology industry were recruiting when other industries were not, because IT became the fourth emergency service. And therefore, we hired a lot of people during those 2 years of the pandemic. And 30% of those hires were early in career. And that doesn't mean age-wise, but what it does mean is perhaps it was their first role in a corporate environment. We had a lot of people transferring from different industries and skills, and Leidos was in a fruitful position to take advantage of those transferable skills coming into technology. So they hadn't been in a corporate environment before because they started in the remote world working with us. So they don't know what they don't know. If you think back to your first role, especially if you did work in a corporate environment. How much easier was it for you to ask someone sitting near you those sort of small questions that are just quick? How do you log into this bit? Where's this and where's that stored? Versus having to set up a call to actually ask those questions. But also down to things like, how do you conduct yourself in a face-to-face meeting? What do you wear? What's the business attire? What's the culture in that organization? Does everyone come in a suit, or are people a little bit more relaxed? Is there a Friday vibe of jeans? You know, what's the etiquette around that? And then something that people, I think, forget is, when do you take a break? I'm terrible for this, and I try to lead by example. But during the pandemic, it was back-to-back meetings, and everyone felt the need to be on show, particularly on camera, all the time, because we were not seen in the offices. But then when we came back out of the pandemic and did start to come into meetings, people forgot to take breaks, and they weren't moving around the office. They were perhaps coming into the office and then spending time in a little meeting room all day, and so no one really saw them anyway. So lead by example and take those small breaks, walk around the floors, encourage walking meetings. And so what Leidos did is, because we saw that people weren't taking breaks, even when they were coming in, is we started to link in sustainability events like litter picking days. And I'm the head of social values. So for me, this comes really easy because I've always got an initiative going. So litter picking was an easy one. Lunchtime cycle sessions. We've got a lot of keen cyclists in our office. So bring your bikes in. We're fortunate to have a bike park in Sky Park where we're based. And everyone gets together, like a group of 15, 20 people, and they go for a wee bike ride at lunchtime. Also encouraging walking meetings. This started in May last year, where it's National Walking Month. For those of you that don't know, make a note of it. It's really easy. It's a nice social media hashtag to get behind, and get groups of people just taking walking meetings. You know, you can do it together, you can do it individually, take a snap, post it on the hashtag, get involved. We actually got really competitive in Leidos. We do like a bit of healthy competition. And we had very small prizes that we gave away for teams that came together and walked the most, and people logged their walking hours. And when I say a small prize, it was like a Leidos branded mug or a T-shirt or something like that. It's not things that are big ticket items, but they make a difference. And those are the things that people came in the office for. So the kind of things that we're doing to encourage people to spend time with their colleagues, going back to some of the things that I mentioned about the walking meetings and the litter picking and the cycling, we actually use our staff networks, whether you call them employee resource groups or staff networks. It's the same thing. Those groups that are usually coming together around particular intersectionalities, your women's networks, your ethnic minority networks, your pride networks. And what we ask them to do is host, in turn, a monthly topical session around their inclusion topic. And they came out with great things. So, for example, our ethnic minority group did two that have now become a staple every year because we've done them 3 years in a row. An International Food Day. That was brilliant because that could be done virtually as well as in person as well, where people would talk about a particular dish, a national dish, and then I mean, you have to run this at lunchtime because otherwise you've got dribbles and salivation going everywhere. So that was great. And the other one was a quiz around Mother Tongue Day. And I believe that is around the end of March as well, the end of May as well. And what we did with that one is we ran a quiz that we were able to do hybrid. So those that were able to come together in an office and do the quiz together were able to do that. And those that wanted to partake remotely were able to do that. And it was done at the back end of a day, sort of around a 4 or 5 o'clock mark, and would run for an hour. And we've got an employee who's just brilliant as a quiz master. And we just get people talking around International Mother Tongue Day, have questions around that topic. But also we broadened the topic. We had like quick fire rounds around songs and music and things like that. It worked really well. High impact, no cost involved. It was really good. Also, events with executives when they're traveling, if they're moving around to different office locations, different departments, including them in your quarterly town halls. What we found is using food as the hook really gets people into the office. So one example is in Sky Park in Glasgow, the Salvation Army is really active, and they can, if you engage with them, you can book them to deliver bacon butties and potato scone breakfast rolls to your office. And it's really low cost because you're making a donation towards the operation costs of the Salvation Army. So we would have breakfast meetings and we would have the social value element in with the Salvation Army. And all of a sudden the car park was full and everyone was looking for a desk. Great atmosphere using something really low hanging and getting people in. We also have lunchtime meetings where we order a few pizzas in and people seem to come. So food seems to be a good hook. And if you think about it, it's relatively inexpensive for what you're actually creating in terms of an engagement. It is really successful in drawing people in, especially those that have been a little less reluctant to come into the office. And once they do come in and they feel that vibe, they're more likely naturally to make a point of coming in a little bit more. If we talk about sort of people who are more remote and what we do, that from an inclusion perspective, we have a lot of online events and webinars as well, because it's not just about making sure the people that are in are happy and want to come back. It's about creating inclusion. And that is exactly what we did coming out of the pandemic, is we doubled down on the inclusion value. We started rolling out a lot more. Instead of nice to have inclusion training, it became compulsory annual training and quarterly equality and diversity playbooks, where we support inclusion of various intersectionalities. And these materials includes guides on how to spend meaningful time together. So using the international food conversation, for example, to get to know your colleagues, or things like first gig that you went to or favorite song, it always gets people talking. And when you have people talking around these commonalities, business becomes a lot easier to conduct on the back of that. And again, our staff networks really played a part in helping us to bring that inclusion value in, particularly one which is called CORE. It's for our employees who are already pre-pandemic embedded in employee sites or are remote workers. So that is their contract. They are a remote worker, or they're embedded on an employee site. And because they're embedded on an employee site, their email address is not even a Leidos email address. They often have a separate email address for the day-to-day running of their job. So that core team, that staff network, their sole purpose is on how do we engage those that maybe don't feel as connected to the Leidos value and the brand. And so they support the business by hosting online events and webinars to build out that remote community. And that's our way of engaging them on a regular basis as well. I've got two more bits I want to share, and then I'll stop if there's any questions coming in. Nikki, feel free to cut me off if you need to. I've got lots of material. Perfect. So what we've done in our office, particularly to make the conversations between Leidos staff who use our offices, to just encourage them, really please think about hybrid working, is our Glasgow office is more about meetings and collaborations than sitting at a desk. So we redesigned our office on the back of the pandemic in looking at the way that spaces were being used, so that when people came in, they felt that buzz into this newly designed collaborative space. It's all open hot desks in areas, and we have two separate areas. We have areas that are quiet zones where people would come in and they maybe have their headphones and be on conference calls that are more sort of them not participating as much but listening, or they're doing training and things like that. And then we have one area where it's a little bit more louder. There's a lot more open space meetings. The volume is sort of a bit more buzzy, but it means that people can choose the hot desk area in which zone that they need to be in. And people fluctuate between the two areas in a day as well. And then we have core desks assigned for people who are in sort of like supporting roles like IT or facilities. One thing that was said, though, is our executive came up and just on the back of the pandemic, after noticing 6 months of utilization, using that data of how many people are coming to the office. And he said quite openly and honestly, use it or lose it, because real estate is very expensive on your books, whether you own it or whether you rent it. And we can do so much more with that capital and invest it back in the people in the company if that's the right thing to do. And so within 3 months of him saying that, we actually lost a floor in Sky Park. So we used to have 3. We gave one back to the landlord because the utilizations showed that we were not warranting the use of 3. And that kind of put shivers up people's spines because they realize that they mean business. They're looking at the data and they're going to act on it. So all of a sudden you started to see people then coming in a little bit more because they had that sudden realization that actually, if I really like our office and I want to come in, I need to make a point of coming in a couple of days a week. Otherwise, I am going to lose that. So my tip for organisations that are maybe perhaps struggling or still very early on in that journey of getting people back into the office is think about the language you use when you're communicating, whether it be verbal or written. When you start saying things like mandatory or mandating things, people naturally will have a pushback. So think about the comm style and the approach. It's really critical that you come across with your company's values. Transparency in reporting. You'll have hard metrics, you'll have soft metrics. So use those qualitative and quantitative metrics to talk about what your ideas are. System scanning and badge scanning versus those informal inputs from your staff networks. Ask your staff networks to host focus groups to find out what's working for various people. And then what we did in Leidos is we started an email trail quite openly on our intranet to say, you said X and we did Y. So you see the transparency of how you're responding, how you are responding to your employees and what they're asking for. We put a lot of emphasis on well-being of our colleagues during this time, and including guidances on working from home is just as important as how you maintain your boundaries for a healthy, balanced work life. So this can be seen, we've seen an increase in our Pulse survey engagement scores around well-being and feeling valued as an employee on the back of that, and that comes from that hybrid piece. And again, there's more and more research coming out, like the report that we've just heard of this morning around remote working and flexibility. It leads to better attraction and retention rates. We found that to be true in Leidos, and it's reflected in our recent retention rate, dropped by 5% year on year, because we know we're retaining key talent. So the numbers are reflecting what we're seeing.
Thank you, Silke. There's so much in that. Thank you, an absolute champion for flexible working. I love that you're looking through hybrid from an inclusion lens. And the words that I've written down is relentless. Like, you know, this is not a one and done. This is something that you're really conscious about. you are proactive about, you're intentional about, and it's all about connecting people and people spending meaningful time together, both in person and in a virtual world. And so much thought going into how you do that and maintain that and continue to improve. And also the fact it can be low cost. And you can use existing networks and resources that you've got. So really so much to say. Please, if you've got any questions for Silke, I know we might not have a lot of time today, but I'm sure Silke would happily get back to people as well if you've got any thoughts or questions.
Absolutely.
And then you started to touch on metrics there, and that's what we're going to hear from Gillian about. Gillian Goldie, who is Head of People and Organisational Development at Scottish Enterprise, who have asked to come along today and talk about, well, how are you measuring this? You know, they were one of the early adopters of hybrid working in Scotland. How do we know it's working in the organisation? So I'm going to hand over to Gillian to share a little bit about what they are doing at Scottish Enterprise to monitor the impact of hybrid working. Thank you.
Grand. Thank you, Nikki. Yes, I think probably firstly to say, in line with Silke, we've been on a journey and we've been learning as we go. So we recognise that everywhere's at different stages on this journey. And we've, as I said, we've had to learn as you go. You don't always get things right. So just to give a wee bit of a context of what we've done, and then I'll talk very high level about some of the monitoring that we've done. We introduced our approach to hybrid working, which we called everyday flexibility, in February 2022. Our approach is very much about kind of empowering, trusting colleagues to decide when, where and how they work as well, subject to them meeting kind of business requirements. So basically they've got personal flexibility around kind of getting their work done. They could decide to either be kind of home-based or office-based, wherever they spend 60% or more of their time. And we found that 89% of our kind of colleagues have selected to be kind of home-based, so very much kind of leaning towards that. So I guess when we introduced our approach, it was really, really important to us that we were kind of thinking about how are we monitoring this, how are we evaluating it, and how are we embedding it across the organisation. So one of the ways in which we continue to support that was, as we developed our everyday flexibility approach, we'd worked with 3 groups of colleagues. So we would worked with a colleague group, a people manager group, and a leadership group, and they had helped us shape and develop our approach, and they continued to work with us as we launched, embedded, monitored, and even to this day we kind of still meet to get their kind of feedback. And I think for me that's really, really an important part of the approach that we've taken. But we also decided that at a 6-month point we would do a really, really comprehensive review of how the approach was working for us as a business. And at the 12-month point, we would also do a kind of further review. So just to give you a flavour, there's probably limited time here, but I'll just give you a flavour of what we did at that 6-month review. So we did a kind of all staff survey to colleagues to ask them about a range of topics: productivity, well-being, work-life balance. We ran focus groups, not just with the groups that were working with us, but we went out to our young leaders group, our My Communities group, our new graduates. We wanted to make sure that we had input and representation from across the business. And we also looked to review really any available data that we felt kind of lended itself to what we were doing here. So we looked at recruitment data, we looked at health and safety data, we looked at how our policies were continuing to be used around kind of leave and sickness as well. And when we looked at all of those areas, we were focusing on a number of themes. We were focusing on productivity, well-being and work-life balance, innovation, collaboration and connection in the business, office usage, net zero, what was our impact on the climate, and the external perspective as well. We were also looking at, exactly as we've talked on in this call, what are other organisations doing in this space as well. And we got a wealth of information from looking at those areas. So again, just to give you a kind of a bit of a theme here around productivity and looking at that productivity theme, we looked at our employee engagement survey as a bit of a proxy for productivity. And our survey data kind of indicated that our employee engagement top 3 scoring strengths related to autonomy, flexibility, and remote working. So we were really hearing that our colleagues really valued those elements of our offering. We also looked at our everyday flexibility survey around productivity and focus group feedback, and we asked colleagues and people managers if they felt productivity had increased, stayed the same, or decreased. And again, we found that the majority of people managers and colleagues felt that everyday flexibility either had a neutral or a positive impact on productivity. We also, in the focus groups, I think productivity is probably a hotly contested kind of area. We did have mixed views, and a lot of the issues that came up around productivity, we actually felt they weren't to do with everyday flexibility. They were perennial kind of issues within our kind of business that had existed for some time as well. We looked at organisational data about how were we performing, were we delivering our measures, because again, that gives us an indication of how as an organisation hybrid working was impacting on our productivity. And we also went to our audit colleagues and said, you're auditing the business, are you picking up anything that's an issue here in relation to how we're working as well? And alongside that, we also asked kind of audit everyday kind of flexibility as well, which was kind of super helpful as well. So as I say, we did a really comprehensive 6-month review. That was just me talking about the productivity element of it. There were many others, but our findings overall were really demonstrated that we had strong kind of well-being support with lots of positive comments about work-life balance and the opportunities it was giving people. We also found some challenges and we took forward a number of actions from our 6-month review. Exactly as Silke said, it was really important with us to share back the results and say, we heard and this is what we've done about it. So we shifted some of our messaging. We had to reinforce some of our messaging to, working rather than being virtual first, work where you can best deliver the job that you're doing at that time as well. We also kind of picked up with our people managers to reinforce a lot of those messages as well. We then conducted a kind of 12-month review, and again, it was fairly high level compared to what we'd done at the 6-month point. But again, we asked very similar questions and some new questions to give us a bit of a comparison. And again, for example, from a productivity and well-being perspective, we found that things were largely the same or there were slight improvements in those areas as well. So it's really just for me to conclude. So there's a bit of an opportunity for kind of questions here. I think it's really, really helpful to be thinking about the impact of what you're doing and evaluating your approach. And so if my kind of top tips from what we've done would be, consider all of your data sources around this. We did a SWOT analysis initially to say, with everyday flexibility, what are the strengths, opportunities, weaknesses, and threats? And against each of those, where can we find qualitative and quantitative data to be able to look at each of those? I think work with your colleagues, as Silke said. I think that's really important. Make sure you're following up on what you've heard, because that organisational listening piece and engagement piece is really, really important to move forward as well. So apologies, I've rattled through that in the interest of question time, but hopefully that gives you a bit of a flavour for some of what we've done around monitoring.
Oh, that's lovely. Thank you so much, Gillian. I think this is so important, this conversation, because a lot of the time we hear I think Lisa mentioned or Jenny mentioned earlier about organisations that are saying, this just isn't working and let's get everybody back to the office. But the next question to that, quite often I would ask is, well, how do you know? And then the fact that places can go a little bit blank because they're not measuring it. They don't really know. It could be very accurate, the observations, or it might just be a knee-jerk reaction, or it might be coming from someone's own bias as a leader, that they would just prefer everybody back in. So I think here data is king, and I don't think it's too late to start monitoring it. I know some organisations might not all have started already, but I don't think it's too late. I think we can start putting metrics in place. We are at the very early beginnings of this new way of working. So if you're not already monitoring and measuring the impact of hybrid working, I think there's still opportunity to start doing that. And as you showed there, Gillian, just using some of the stuff you're already monitoring. It doesn't need to be overly complicated, and it's something you can build on. So thank you for rattling through that and sharing some really practical examples of what you're doing. So Jenny's been keeping an eye on the chat and the questions. So we've got about 5 or 6 minutes left. Jenny, do you want to come in and respond? I know there's quite a lot going on there, and anything you would like to pick up on there, Jenny?
So a couple of quick ones that I know I can answer. Someone was asking, saying, could they see the survey questions? The report actually has quite a lot of the questions or the statements that we asked. And if you want to see something more specific, get in touch and I'm happy to share what we've got. Someone else was asking about the motivations of younger workers and why they want to come into the office so much. I don't have the data right to hand, but I remember that social connection was the biggest reason that they wanted to come in. I'm sure wanting to learn and onboarding, I'm sure they were part of the picture, but I do remember that it was that social connection that was the biggest driver for why they wanted to come in. And the question, I guess, that I wanted to kind of put out to our speakers, because I know it comes up a lot, is, and someone's put it here, there are some people who don't want to come into the office, and what are employers saying to these people to resolve that situation? And I wonder if Silke and Gillian might just say a brief word on that question. Silke, shall I?
Sure, yeah. So I think that there's a rationale behind everybody's decision and their choice. And by forcing up and saying, you've got to come in, you've got to come in, you've got to come in, you're not being open and inclusive as to the reason why someone is not coming in. So having those meaningful one-to-one discussions to try and understand the root is key, but also making sure that you've got your data points as to the why you're asking. Are you just saying, I need you to come in? Or are you following it up with, we're seeing that, particularly if they have managerial duties, that the team are lacking in motivation, or the output is not as cohesive as it could be, or deadlines are being missed on projects. Following it up with data points to say, we feel that if you came in a little bit more, the team might feel a bit more coordinated, they might feel that they know each other. Perhaps it's a new team and they haven't had that chance to form and get to know each other, and that's why it's impacting the work. But use data as a reason to justify why the ask is, as opposed to just saying, we need you to come in.
Grand. So I would just kind of add to that. I mean, I guess in our approach, we've said that we do expect everyone to be in the office despite, what they've selected. It's important from that collaboration and connection perspective. And so again, we've encouraged people managers to be thinking about, what is the activity you're doing? So when is it helpful to come together? And I think, Silke, that talks to your, kind of rationale. So you're clear that, this is why, we're coming together, and face-to-face may work for this activity in particular. And again, I guess the other final thing we've done is encourage people managers, and they're doing this themselves, thinking about, when their team meetings come together, do they do some one-to-ones on the back of that so that people are in for the full day and can build that connection across the team as well. Thinking of, other social activities to pull people together as well is really important.
Okay, thank you so much. I'm so sorry, we're absolutely out of time. We've got about 2 minutes left. There's so many good comments conversations, questions going on, we are so happy to follow up with people. Some of the questions here would probably need a follow-up conversation because they're meaty topics that we're getting asked about here. So Lisa and I are more than happy to jump on a call with anybody here today to have a conversation specific to, you know, what you're experiencing in your organisation. So thank you, Jenny, for sharing so eloquently all of the kind of headline findings from the report. Thank you, Silke. Thank you, Gillian, for sharing practically what you're doing in your organisations. Thank you all of you for coming along today, and also want to thank our sponsors. So these events, these webinars that we hold and our in-person events are made possible because we have sponsors. We have sponsors at Scottish Government, Scottish Water, Quorum, Arnold Clark and Pursuit Marketing. So thank you to those guys for supporting us and for being real champions of flexible working. Hopefully the event today has given you some really useful insights on what's happening in offices across Scotland right now, and maybe giving you some ideas that you can take back to your own organisations. I think there's no doubt about it, the genie is out the bottle, as we keep hearing, and the hybrid really is the new normal way of working. And it is absolutely normal to have some niggles with it. And this is not one and done. We're continuing to learn and evolve. And of course, it would be absolutely remiss of me to not to mention that we offer support for employers. So we offer specifically hybrid training for managers as well as for whole teams to help with some of these issues around connection and communication and collaboration. And we also offer broader support for employers who want to increase their flexible working or indeed assess their current flexible working or hybrid working offering, which lots of organisations are doing at the moment. So we can come in and help with some of the heavy lifting on that. So please do get in touch, keep in touch with us. If you're not on our mailing list, please do sign up, and Laura Jane will be in touch with a follow-up survey. So please do take time to complete that and join our mailing list, come along to more of these events. And as I said, more than happy to have a follow-up conversation with anyone who's here today that's looking for a bit more support, advice with regard to what's happening within their own organisation. So thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful day, and we'll hopefully see you at our next event.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.
Thank you.
Bye.